What I'd like to do with this video is to show you how to do a three-dimensional diaphragmatic breath, and also teach you various techniques on decreasing the rate of breathing, which will decrease your breathing overall. So breathing less, you'll live longer. We as a population are breathing way too much based on various factors, but we're exhausting the system because with the repetitiveness of breathing, especially invertedly, we are creating postural dysfunction, we are creating a poor environment for our cells to live in, and a host of other biochemical changes and challenges are being presented with hyperventilation, high blood pressure, and hypoxia, and other respiratory and biochemical challenges. The art of diaphragmatic breathing goes back a long ways. Now, if you have read part 1 and part 2, then you're up to speed on where I'm going to pick up from right now, because the purpose of this video is just to show you how to use your diaphragm, how to do a three-dimensional breath, and to give you some insight on how to start decreasing your rate of breathing. The diaphragm is so important, and for the basis of this video, we're going to talk about its importance from an oxygenation and utilization perspective. But in my article, I briefly described that the diaphragm, being a muscle, also stabilizes the spine, which is a surprise to a lot of people, a lot of my clients when I'm consulting with them about their pain, and we talk about the core. We get into this discussion about the diaphragm being part of the inner core muscles. Now, I don't want to belabor that point. I have in many of my articles, you can find them on my blog. If you haven't read anything about the inner unit, they're in a lot of my articles. I have put in some photos, and we discussed a little bit about the inner core in part 2 of my Breathe Less, Live Longer article. So basically, what I have found over the last 15 to 20 years is people are breathing invertedly. And I have to reteach them how to breathe until it becomes unconscious. Breathing is part of the autonomic nervous system, hence the word autonomic, meaning automatic. You don't have to think about breathing, but I'll tell you what, as I begin to teach you how to breathe three-dimensionally and diaphragmatically and with a slower rate, you'll have to think about it. You'll have to be conscious, which is fine. In my phase 1 restoration reprogramming phase, in there, that's when I'm reprogramming a lot of muscles that have forgot what they're supposed to do. The diaphragm, being with the autonomic nervous system and having sensory input and output, they call that loss of memory sensory motor amnesia. And it can be rebooted like a computer, because that is exactly what your human organism is a system of systems. Just like your computer has many systems on it. And at any time, you can open various systems at one time. And they interact with one another. Your body is no different. You have 10 basic biological systems, like your digestive system, your immune system, your nervous system, your cardiovascular system, your musculoskeletal system, and I can go on. But all of them interact. The breathing, part of that autonomic nervous system, when we start using that muscle, and when we start consciously thinking about how we're using it, we are storing that in our memory, so that eventually it becomes unconscious. that's where I'm at with my techniques. I've been practicing this for 25 years, and in the last 10 years I've improved it immensely, and then in the last 5 months researching to write these articles, and I've adapted now this new technique of rate of breathing. But I've been doing diaphragmatic, slow, controlled breaths for a long time, and it has changed everything. It helps my sleep, helps me to manage the stresses in my life, and it's helped me with my performance and my training and my recovery. But what we're going to learn is that it's a conscious effort at first. When I'm in phase 1 with one of my clients, I am having to go through the 3 stages of motor learning. And in this video, you're going to be in stage 1, which means you have to be very cognitive, you have to be very conscious, you have to be able to focus and concentrate until you get some memory built up. It's like anything you're learning that's new. Driving a car, for a child maybe tying their shoe. And you can think of many other examples where at first you had to really have it be quiet. You had to be able to concentrate so that you can build up that memory. And then after a while, when you move out of stage 1, you get into stage 2, and now you can do 2 or 3 things at one time. So driving becomes easier. Tying your shoes is nothing. But for harder things to learn, there is yet one more stage, which is stage 3, where it becomes automatic, and that's where I'm at with my diaphragmatic breathing. So even when I'm under stress and I'm training, I'm still using the diaphragm because it is now built into my memory. So that's cognitive freedom at stage 3. In order for your body to learn something new, you have to be in a controlled environment, meaning you don't want to be around a lot of noise or distractions. And you also want to put your body in a position, a physical position, where it's easier to adapt. In this case, lying down would be the best way to learn to diaphragmatically breathe. Because when you're upright, now you have gravity, and believe me, it changes. I could measure somebody or test somebody's diaphragmatic breathing lying down, and let's say they don't do too bad at it. Out of the 3 dimensions, maybe they're hitting the first dimension. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But the minute I sit them up, they're inverted. And they look at me and they go, well, why did it change? I said, well, you're up against gravity, which then requires a different motor response. And there's other reasons. So I tell them, we'll practice this lying, and then once we get that mastered, then we're going to go to seated, and it won't take that long because we have established some sort of a memory pathway as far as where to breathe. So many reps lying down, and it takes sometimes 3,500 repetitions to develop a memory. It all depends on how deconditioned or how much of that motor system is dysfunctional or not working properly. So about 3,500 repetitions, thereabouts. And then they'll go to seated, and it'll take a little bit more concentration, but at least now they understand mentally and biologically, they understand how to use their air, and they're concentrating on that, which is another thing about lying down. You can concentrate more, and that's that cognitive attention. And once that's built, you can use that for seated. Now, what is an inverted breath? So when I'm testing breathing lying down, one of the things I'm looking for is whether or not when they take a deep breath that their chest elevates first. Do you see that? Let me do that again. So you'll notice that the chest rises first, which is a real problem. And one of the problems with that is you're using your chest and some of your cervical muscles to breathe with. Now, although they do help, but they're not designed to be the main breathing muscle apparatus. In fact, by over-engaging these muscles, they get tight, and that's part of the reason we have a problem with forward head posture. So not only do we have postural problems, but the head comes forward, and that will make your breathing even worse, amongst other things. When I have someone and I'm checking their posture and I see they have forward head posture, I'm already detecting that these muscles here are very tight, and when I look at their diaphragmatic breathing, just about 100% of the time it's a match. The more forward the head, the more dysfunction in the breathing. Do you know that you breathe over 25,000 times a day? Wow, isn't that something? So imagine using these muscles 25,000 repetitions a day. I'm telling you, if I had you do 25,000 arm curls, your arm would be stuck in a contracted position. So we have to unlearn that to help people with their sleep apnea, their digestive concerns, their low oxygen levels, their acidic blood, and also irregularities in how the heart coordinates with the breath, and so on and so forth. So that's what I'm looking for in an inverted breath. In a diaphragmatic breath, this is what we should see. Watch the bottom hand. In proper diaphragmatic breathing, 2/3 of the air should travel into your abdomen and 1/3 into your chest. In my diagram in part 2, I show you that the diaphragm is shaped like a parachute. And when it opens and expands downward, it's contracted. So there's the inhale down to the belly. The lobes of your lungs insert into the lower leaflets of your diaphragm. The lobes of your lungs. So if we're not driving air down, we're not getting proper oxygenation into the bloodstream. That's the first dimension. The second dimension is to let the ribs expand. And the third dimension is to let the back ribs expand. So basically, you're just breathing with your canister. Think of your ribs, whether it be your floating ribs or the ribs here in the front of your body, like gills on fish. And another thing that I've observed in testing people's diaphragm is how tight they are around their rib cage. They call that thoracic rigidity, which is decreasing how you can expand and use your diaphragm to oxygenate your blood. It's sort of like trying to flex your bicep with a rubber band around it, or maybe like a cloth. Use that as an example. It's restricting the movement there, which is restricting circulation and all kinds of other things. And speaking of circulation, did you know that with proper diaphragmatic breathing, you're massaging your gallbladder and your liver, your appendix and your spleen? And by the diaphragm dropping down, it's also helping with peristalsis and digestion, believe it or not. So there's a host of challenges when we're not using the diaphragm. So as I breathe down into the first dimension, I also want to breathe out into the ribs. I just tell my clients, don't specifically worry about these back here yet. Let's drive it down into the first dimension, into the belly, and then breathe out. And as you're practicing that lying down, eventually the floating ribs will kick in. Now the rate. All right. So what I started teaching is I would take a number, like let's say 5 seconds. 5 seconds in through my nose. And then 5 seconds out through my nose. And then I used a technique where the exhalation was slower. So they say that whatever the first number is, you should double it for the exhalation. So if it's 5 in, it would be 10 out. 4 in, it would be 8 out. So in the rate of breathing, you could still do that technique. I wouldn't go past 10 to 12 seconds unless you're ready. I can go, when I'm breathing out, exhaling, I can go as much as 18 to 25 seconds out now. All right, now I don't want to get into all the various techniques and ancient arts of the holding of the breath and all these other great things. I've worked with athletes who needed to work breathing, especially when I worked with a Navy SEAL athlete. I had to research drown proofing and his ability to hold his breath. Well, okay, I digress. What we're talking about here is when I'm measuring the rate of breathing in a client, I have them lay down for a few minutes to relax, and then I take my stopwatch and I monitor how many breaths that they do in a minute. Now, normal breathing, as I indicated in my article, at rest for an adult is anywhere from 12 to 20 breaths. That's supposed to be the normal. And I don't believe that's really normal. And I've measured anywhere from 7 to 28 breaths, which means that the person that's doing the 28, they're breathing way too much within an hour. And that's exhaustive on your system. The more you have to labor your breathing, the faster you'll age. Guaranteed, because that's oxidative stress. Because the amount of oxygen versus free radicals, or the decrease of alkalinity to the increase of acidic properties, is all, that's where disease grows, and that's how we age. That's how we go into a catabolic state versus an anabolic state. So the rate I start teaching, I would say like 5 in, 5 out through the nostrils, take a little pause, and then start again. If you want to use the maybe the 5 in, 10 out, then you take a little pause, and then you start the cycle again. And with practice, this becomes the way you'll breathe. Not that you're going to sit there and breathe for 5 in, 10 out, and then pause. But when you're out there in the real world and you're standing in line, you're stuck in traffic, you're waiting at a stoplight, you're breathing through your diaphragm. You're back to that state. Or if you're encountering high stress, right? You become aware and you go, wow, that was really stressful. I think I'm going to stop here for a minute, sit down, and I'm going to breathe. I got to re-regulate the system. I can't keep stacking that stress on my heart and my lungs and my organs. So we're breathing less through the day, but more efficiently. But what this video will start you with is the basics, so that you can start to implement this into your life. Now, the last thing, as long as you're lying there and you're taking a few minutes to practice, think of that as being mindful. Now you're in a mindful position. Now, I've talked about this in a number of articles. I teach this a lot because the weakest muscle in the body is the brain, is the mind rather. And that incessant talking that the mind is doing all the time, and all the thinking and all the worrying, we have to get to a point throughout the day where we can shut that down and then kind of like recover and then go back at it again. I work and write and see clients, but periodically I stop, take 5 breaths, empty my mind, and then I can go back to work. I So you're in this mindful state, and I tell my clients, as long as you're lying there, as long as you're lying on the floor, or lying in your bed practicing this, and you're undisturbed, think of that as meditation. Meditation doesn't have to be sitting in a certain position, and meditation doesn't mean that your mind is empty. I'd like to, my mind is never empty. Even not thinking is thinking. But I'm focusing on my breath. I'm focusing on where I'm at right now. Because that's all that matters, is the right here and now. Not 10 minutes from now, not 10 minutes before. I'm right here, right now. Because when I'm done practicing my breathing, then I'm back into my modus of operandi. I got to get things done, I got agendas, I got work to be done, etc. There's nothing wrong with that. We have to be able to be productive. But are we being dysfunctional while we're being productive? Or do we have a sense of autonomy so that we can get more done without stressing ourselves out? All right. So I'm going to go to the floor, and I'm going to show you how to practice this, and I will also demonstrate how to practice it sitting. But I would highly recommend that you spend a couple of days or more practicing it lying down. And you're going to have biofeedback. I'm going to teach you how to get in touch with your body, which is another thing. We're not in touch with this beautiful human organism we call the human body. So we're going to get in touch with it, get in tune with it. I would prefer that your legs are bent. First, just get yourself comfortable. At first, I want you to place one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly to make sure we can get the first dimension mastered. So you're going to breathe in through your nose. 2/3 is down here and 1/3 is up here. And when you exhale, slow. Then there's that little pause. We're going to go again. Okay, if that gets frustrating, just stop for a second. Reset and start again. If it gets too frustrating, you're done practicing. Because if it gets to be stressful, it's defeating the purpose of the exercise. For the second dimension, you place, once you've gotten this one, for the second dimension, you place your hands on your ribs. Breathe down and out. I do not recommend that you sit on a stability ball like I'm doing. But I want you also, if you can, sit away from the backrest of the chair that you're sitting in. If you need support, sit all the way back against the backrest, but make sure that you're in good posture when you practice this. Okay? So let's start out with the first dimension, a belly breath. And then when you master that, let's go to the second, possibly the third dimension here. All right. So I hope that will start your journey into the ancient art of diaphragmatic breathing, but also the art of slowing the rate of breathing down. I think the metaphor with the slowing of the breath is that we need to slow down in life once in a while. We're moving at 100 miles an hour, ladies and gentlemen. More so in the last century than ever, thanks to our technologies. And using these arts helps us so that we can still interact in the world and interact with our devices, our machines, computers, cell phones, tablets, or whatever they are. But we're coming back to wholeness, wellness, or if I might add, oneness. So I know when to work, I know when to play, I know when to be busy, but I also know when to stop and breathe, slow down the thinking. It's all part of my mind training that I teach my clients, have to teach my clients. And I've been working on this myself. The mind training part I've been doing for 35 years. And I will say it's been quite a journey. It's not always as easy as I read and study about various arts to help me to manage my mind. But it has gotten easier over time. The only way you'll be tested is when you have an obstacle. And that's when your obstacle becomes an opportunity of learning. All right. So take this, practice it. If you have additional questions or would like to get assessed, not just your breathing, if you'd like to improve your wellness, improve your movement for everyday life, not just for athletics and fitness, give me a call here at the Wellness Movement Center. I have contact information that will follow this video. I appreciate you watching, and I always share because I care. Have a great day. Bye for now.